Good afternoon and welcome to Healthy Lifestyle. I'm Lori-Ann Casdia. Our goal here at Healthy Lifestyle is to inspire, educate, and empower you to fulfill a healthy, emotional, spiritual, and physical life. Well, happy May, and this is the month I'd like to focus on the theme of manifestation. We're kind of rolling into June at this point. Hope you all had a good Memorial weekend. After all, spring is the season to bring things to life. So my big question continues to be, what would you like to bring into fruition, and what steps can you take this spring to make that happen? So whatever it is that you dream of manifesting, you can absolutely make it a reality. We've spoken about this before. I want you to really commit to a goal. It's about commitment to yourself, and that's what I want to see you do. And take a constant action towards it. It can be a little bit every day, but take a constant action towards it. You're going to see you can manifest into your life anything that you think of. So make it positive. Keep your thoughts positive. Today, I'm excited to jump right in to speak with our guest, Joe Dowd. He is the editor and associate publisher of Long Island Business News. I was right with that title, right, Joe? And just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful writer. You wrote a book, two books, a musical and a book, right? And the name of the book is?
Gods and Firemen.
And the musical, which I find very intriguing that you wrote a musical too. You have that theatrical background to you, huh? What the name of the musical?
Sons of Brooklyn.
Sons of Brooklyn. Well, we're going to get back to that. But I do want to talk about you and how you contribute to Long Island Business News, how you got into writing.
Lori-Ann, thank you for having me on.
Of course, welcome. Good to see you too.
I got into writing, I was 14 years old, and I read a book called Ethan Frome. And I realized that this particular author, was doing something that I really wanted to do, and that was to twist the audience's mind. And I figured I could do it, even that early on.
Wow.
And I started doing things with the writing then that just led me in directions one after another toward where I am today.
You have such a gift of writing, and I love your style. It's very approachable and very connecting. We can connect. I connect when I read your stories. I feel like I'm wherever it is that you're writing about. I feel like I'm going through that. So you take us as a good storyteller does, and that's why the musical is kind of surprising to me, yet not, because music is just a written word to music. Obviously, you take us on that emotional ride. How does that come? Where do you get that from?
I don't know. I wish I could tell you.
Right.
But I actually hear it. I mean, that's the simple way to put it.
Yeah.
And when I write columns for Long Island Business News, it's kind of the same thing. It's I think about the news, and I think about what's very important to Long Island readers, and I look at some options. And then I make a decision, and I start to hear where to go with it.
Right.
I play with the top, and I think of it in terms of a beginning, middle, and end, and then the two pieces that join the middle. So, it's just that's pretty much the process that goes on, but it usually takes about 24 hours to formulate it from the point of thinking to the point of writing.
Amazing. Now, and you guide journalists all the time, younger journalists. How do you like that process? What's that process like for you?
It can be difficult because sometimes they want to write their own way, and they have come out of school with a certain version of what journalism is supposed to be, and a lot of times you have to make it clear to them that they need to they have to engage with audiences. They have to go out and be reporters first before they're writers. If you think about all of the great writers that we've ever had, from the biblical writers to Shakespeare, they did some heck of a good reporting.
Yeah.
They clearly were there. They saw things. They heard other people's versions of it. And you go right up through the 20th century, and you go to Hemingway. This was a guy who saw war and then wrote about it. The Great Gatsby and F. Scott Fitzgerald is just a remarkable book of reporting about a part of the world here on Long Island that other people never got to see. And he encapsulated it and made it count.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the trick. What you try to teach young reporters is go out and find the stories and report it until it's time to write. It writes itself.
How How do you feel about journalists today? Because we see a lot of journalists just writing. I know you're very, very fact-based. You really want to make sure that you check the sources that you have, and you're very fact-based. You're, in my estimation, a journalist as I used to know it. I'm really not seeing that these days. That's where that whole phrase "false news" comes from. How do you feel about that? I mean, what's going on with your industry as far as that goes?
Well, it's a great question. I think the answer is that if you aren't fact-based, you're not going to be a journalist for very long. Even people who perhaps play a more sensational side of our business.
Right.
I think they too are fact-based, because if you started getting things wrong, you wouldn't be much of a journalist. I think the bigger question that you ask me is what's going on in my business, and I can tell you that while newsrooms are smaller, news gathering is not going anywhere. We're going to need news gatherers forever.
Right.
For those of you who would, wonder how much fact gathering is going on, just read one of the main newspapers in the country, one of the top 5 or 10, and you can't believe the kinds of coverage and depth. And they also have time for the ending of Game of Thrones.
Right. Yeah.
Something I haven't seen a single episode of.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people out there doing it. There are a lot of mediums. The mediums have changed. The internet certainly changed things, and it changed how we do business.
So do you think that there's a lot more pressure on journalists and news modalities that because of the 24/7 proposition, because of having all these different platforms, websites, social media, then your print, which is kind of in, kind of out. Do you think that puts a lot more pressure on you?
We've always had pressure, and the pressures change with different eras and different technology. You have a great question. When I went through these eras, I actually remember the last days of hot type. So,
okay, tell me what hot type is.
Okay, it's a good question. It's a type of printing press where, where the letters are actually printed out of lead, and they were hot, and they were put into a box and then onto a press.
Like slid in?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
You've seen pictures of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But then we went to what's called cold type, which is a different version of
is that the roll
press.
Barrel one?
So yes, that's right. It's an offset, they call it. But in the late 90s, I saw that the whole world was changing, and you could see it. You could see it with the little the infancy of it was you sending messages to each other at work. They had a simple message system, and everybody was on it, telling secrets to each other, and the editor's an idiot, and the city desk doesn't know what it's doing, and they were all messaging each other, and that's when I started to say, this is going to catch on.
Yeah.
What a lot of us did was we saw a way to go forward, and that was to be an all-purpose news operation that not only did print, but also did online, and did it quickly, and then ultimately went 24/7 to the extent that the size of our newspaper or news organization could afford it.
Oh, yeah. Your Long Island Business News does a really good job of covering business around Long Island.
Thank you.
And really being topical, right on what's going on and what's really affecting our lifestyle. Hence one of the reasons why I have you on here. But also, I also know that you have love and admiration for firemen, and that's because of somebody who was very influential in your life, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and that would be?
My father was a battalion chief, a decorated officer in the FDNY. And I've been a fire buff since I was about 5 or 6 years old, because he would drag me to the firehouse on those days to pick up his check or see the guys or one of those things. He was not working at the time. He wouldn't leave me there on the back of the truck and put out fires.
That's good.
I think it's best. To this day, I wish I had gone on one run with him for sure.
Yeah.
But having him in my life was a great influence, because not only was he a friend of firefighters and a historian of the fire department, and he told me a lot of those stories. He also had great firehouse stories. He was kind of like the greatest character in my life. He wasn't perfect. He was the kind of guy who was hard to reach, and you had to reach him on the right day and at the right time of day.
Sure.
But when you did, it maybe that was where the reporting came from. You kind of had to get that story out of them.
So that's interesting that you said that. I've known you for a while, and I've never heard you say it that way before. So do you think your ability to ask those right questions when you're going after a story and listening and finding that right time, like you had to do with your dad, helped enhance your storytelling capability and fact-gathering capabilities?
Well, I think it was getting questions answered from authority figures that might have been influenced by him. He was an authority figure who often didn't want to tell me what was going on at the firehouse, in part to protect me. Okay?
Right.
Remember, I was a kid when I started asking these questions, and he was in some of the most difficult firefighting situations, both in Brooklyn and the South Bronx and Harlem. In fact, he made a rescue that I didn't get the story out of him until the last year of his life. So this was a guy who guarded secrets, and that's a kind of closed fraternity. And they don't always want to talk about it, not only with reporters, but with anybody outside the brotherhood.
Is it because they don't want to have to relive it?
No, I think
or we don't understand it.
No, that's right. They're very much like warriors, and think of their enemy as fire.
Yeah.
And in that way, soldiers don't often tell war stories except to each other.
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason why they have a brotherhood the way they do.
Yeah.
Because it's their own thing, and you have to be in it to understand it.
I find it interesting that you utilize your dad as a character in just about everything that you write. So definitely in your Sons of Brooklyn, and definitely in Gods and Firemen. And I really want to speak about Gods and Firemen because I love you were telling me the story about how you wrote it and how it's not only fact-based, it's historic, and then you just change some components and elements to put everything together. Let's talk about that, the storyline. Tell us a little bit about the storyline. And Gods and Firemen you can find on Amazon.com, right?
That's right.
Gods and Firemen by Joe Dowd. Go ahead. Just a little bit.
Thanks, Laurie. I mean,
you're welcome. It's a great, really fast-reading book. Part of
the reason that I wrote the book was to find some answers about my own life, and this has been a recurring theme. I mean, I ended up being a successful journalist, which is to say, that's pretty good, but my dad was my hero. Why didn't I follow him into the job? It's a question that has come up a number of times in my career and in my life. So I think why Gods and Firemen was a search was to find all of that and find myself in that book, in that history. So what I did was I looked at 100 years of firefighting history told through the secret diaries of one firefighting family across 3 generations. And inside of that story, you learn a great deal about the General Slocum fire, which actually comes up this month in June.
It's an anniversary.
Anniversary
right?
is June 15th. Yeah,
10 year?
No, and the General Slocum took place in June 15th, 1904.
Oh, 1904.
And it has often been lost to history because just a few years later, on March 25th, 1911, you lose the Triangle Factory fire. Well, my book spans the same fire chief who was at both fires and the people around him. Some of it historic, some of it is part of the narrative.
And the Slocum fire happened where? Off
present-day Roosevelt Island in a place called Hell's Gate. It's off Astoria in the East River.
And quickly, just
1,100 people were killed on what was essentially a paddle boat steamer that were going to a Long Island picnic run by the church they went to.
Oh.
The church was in the Lower East Side in what we call Alphabet City then, but
right.
At the time was called Little Germany, eine kleine Deutschland. So that neighborhood within 10 years disappeared because of the tragedy. So many people were touched. It devastated the Lower East Side, what we think of as the Lower East Side.
Right.
And many of those people moved away into present-day Glendale, Bushwick, Ridgewood,
right.
Queens, to get away from the tragedy and formed a whole nother German-American community over there.
Right.
So just a few years later, 7 years later, less than, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire takes place and kills 146 young women, mostly immigrant Italians and Jews who had been here working for as little as $6 a week, 6-day a week, putting together a shirtwaist, which were all the fad then. They were a popular outfit the women wore, was ready to wear, as they call it.
Right.
Those factory doors were locked, and they were prevented from going out the safe haven that they would have been able to if they could access the stairwells. That fire, and to an extent the Slocum, influenced the next decade of fire safety measures across the world, but completely in New York. After the Triangle Fire, there were the fire codes were completely rewritten, and those rewritten codes, as amended 1917, as amended 2001, became the canon of fire safety for all of the country and the world beyond.
Amazing how that was executed, and good that we did the updates, because we don't always do that when we have tragedies. So, but those were back to back, and it was the same captain. That
same fire chief. His name was Chief Edward F. Croker. He was chief of department from 1899 to 1911. He retired and formed the first fire prevention division in the city of New York, and he was a Long Islander. He lived out in the Hamptons, and he lived in the firehouse in Manhattan when he was chief, because long commute back then. They didn't have helicopters to take him out to the Hamptons.
Right.
And he also owned a summer home in Long Beach. Okay. Right on the water, actually. There's the water then. They built the boardwalk in between.
So this story is very touching, and it's just, it really oozes of history. I love that you intertwined all that. What was your inspiration? I know Dad was partly the inspiration, but the storyline isn't about Dad.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No. It's a journey, and it's a journey of one man who wants to find out what went wrong in his life, and it's a lot more than he just wanted to be a fireman. That is a tangential thing.
Right.
This is a guy who has chased false idols. This is a guy who his life is not where it should be, and he has a lot of people around him, including those firefighters, who help him on this journey to find what's going on with the secrets of the Knights of Florian, a secret fraternity in the FDNY that has special duties. And among them are to find arsonists and people who are involved in terrible actions against the city of New York and bring them to justice.
Right.
That's the central theme of the story. You might think of the history as a frame story, and inside it is this other journey. Yeah,
it's great the way it twists and turns, and it keeps you on edge, and there's it just takes you for an emotional ride. But again, that's your writing style. Why did you name it Gods and Firemen?
It's a line that Chief Croker's girlfriend says to him to Theodore Roosevelt's wife, where they are talking about the men that we know. And in it, they said, sometimes we think of them as gods, but they are just men. And the meaning is that sometimes we look up to them, and somewhere deep down, they're just guys trying to do a job.
Yeah, but it's a dangerous job, and it takes a certain type of person to be able to do that.
Yes.
You know, I have the great, and just recently, a couple of weekends ago, obviously because Memorial Day is here, I was singing national anthems for a lot of the fire department. That's my kind of little tiny bit of give back to them, to say thank you, because we have volunteer firemen out in the Long Island area. And you know, I always say, this is the least I could do. It's the only thing I can do, because I can't see myself running towards a fire. And I watch these heroes, and they're real heroes, running towards fires, taking care of other people, putting their life in danger to save, like our military, save other people. I think it's not only heroic, you do look up to them, because it's something we don't have the ability to do. Did you find your answer? Do you know why you didn't become a fireman?
No, but maybe the next book we'll work on that.
Well, you did leave this story, and I'm waiting for the sequel. So I'm hoping it's coming out, because you left it in such a way where you're like, come on, I want more. So once you read it, you get addicted to the characters and you want to see what happens to them. So I definitely think that you owe that to your reading population to let us know what's going on. But I find it interesting that you didn't go in. But do you think, and I'd like to talk more about this in the second half, do you think that maybe, and I'll drop it out here and we can talk about it in the second half, do you think that maybe you did this and went to writing and not a fireman because you are destined to be a writer? With that, I'd say you are listening to Healthy Lifestyle. I'm Lori Ann Casdia. We are speaking to the great friend, Joe Dowd, and we will be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Lifestyle. I'm Lori Ann Casdia. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas on topics, guests, anything that you'd like to talk about, please email us at healthylifestylewithla@gmail.com. And, of course, follow us on social media at Healthy Lifestyle with LA. We just want to see you getting that positive attitude and changing your life and finding that joy. It's really important to find the joy in your life. And remember, we really need to focus on the theme of manifestation and manifesting the type of life that you want. That's what we're due. We're supposed to be here and have a good time. That's what life is about. But we were here and we just left off with Joe Dowd from Long Island Business News. He is the editor and associate publisher of Long Island Business News. And we left off where I asked you a very pointed question, kind of referring to your book, Gods and Firemen, and which you can find on Amazon.com. But where did you find your inspiration, and why were you not becoming a fireman? Was it because you think this is your journey? You're supposed to be. You're here to be a writer. And tell stories.
Lori, again, thank you for having me. I think the manifestation that you were talking about was that I really wanted to write a book my whole life. And when I decided to start it, I decided I'd write a version of my own life because that was the only one I knew.
Sure. Well, you're supposed to write about what you know, right?
Kind of. Yeah, it kind of helps the whole process. Yeah. So finding yourself and getting that inner wellness, as you refer to it, I think of it more as reaching goals. This was something that was a lifelong goal that people said I couldn't do. And I researched that book for part of 10 years, right, on and off, and wrote it in a course of 2 and rewrote it over 2 more. Right. And that in and of itself, getting to the final point and being able to put a book together and then moving it through the process is just tedious. But getting it to the point where you could hand it to people and say, it's done. Yeah. I did it. And now I don't care if you read it, what happens, if people like it. That wasn't important to me anymore. Right. So I think, as any writer might say to you, the most important part of writing is just doing it. Yeah. Well, that's anything in life. We can talk about things. I see people saying, I want to do this, I want to do this. I'm like, well, when are you doing it? You got to do it. So you did it. You wrote Gods and Firemen. You have it out there. Didn't really, it hasn't gone on fire yet. It's not a #1 bestseller yet. But that's part of, we were talking about this in the breaks, part of marketing. And making sure that people are aware of it if we're not aware that it's out there. And this is such a well-written book. It's such a good storyline. It really leaves me wanting to know where the characters are going. How does this really end? Does it end? It really isn't a storyline that's going to end. It's going to be ongoing because it continues in generations, right? That's right. Yeah. So I suspect that it will definitely take off when it's right and in its own time, because that's what marketing's about, making sure people are aware of it. And you have to be visible.
in order for people to be aware that you have something like that happening. And you're doing that by being here today and talking to our listeners. So that's good. I'm very proud of you about that. I know
thank you.
You're very uncomfortable about doing it. So, and you don't like talking about yourself, which is kind of like your dad, don't you think?
That's funny that you mentioned that, because I hadn't thought of that. And maybe that's the reason I don't like to talk about myself. And maybe that's what's wrong with marketing in general, But it's interesting because the musical that preceded the book, we marketed that very well, and I'm not sure how that was different. We wrote
Sons of Brooklyn.
Sons of Brooklyn is a story about a boy who wants to be a fireman, but he's afraid of heights. And that's a real big problem.
That's problematic.
That's a problem, says his girlfriend in the first act. And he also is afraid of disappointing his old man. He wants him to be a doctor or a lawyer or something professional. And the second act resolves lots of this, but it had 21 or 2 original musical pieces that I wrote over a series of years. And music, as you said quite earlier, and you are a musician, of course, you know this, that It's just the language. And if you can speak the language, you can write it. And if you can write it, you can get good at it.
Yes.
And then you need editors who, in music, we call these people,
angels. I call them angels.
It's a good word for them, frankly. The people who can really do that stuff and put it all together.
Yeah, you've finessed pieces of mine, and just with just one word have inspired me beyond.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Beyond. And you look at it and you see it with such crystal clarity, and that intrigues me in and of itself. So being part of the process is one thing, but also watching the process is another. And I find myself I admire how you can just immediately go to something and say, I got it. You're very kind about it. You've never said anything like, oh, this is the most terrible thing I've ever written or ever read. You're very kind about it, but with just a phrase, you can just send a writer, send a journalist in a direction that makes it make sense. So that's such a gift, and you implement it in your book. You implemented it in your musical. It's amazing how you do that, and you do that with your journalists, and you do that at LIBN.
Yes, I mean, as much as I can take credit for what may be the best staff pound for pound on Long Island,
they're wonderful people.
News people. These are great journalists, and a lot of them have been here longer than me, actually. These are people who have years and years invested in the news business in different forms. I have Dave Winzelberg, who is just terrific on real estate.
Yes.
A truly amazing reporter on a beat that is vital to the business community.
Yes.
Just central here.
And is right on the pulse. He is always on top of it.
Right. I have Bernadette Starzi, who has covered our focus sections for us. Wide range of subjects from... she can cover anything. It's like scary good. And then Adina again, who has been with us about 3 years.
Love Adina.
And she's terrific.
Yeah.
She writes stories that nobody else will find, and it has to do with trends. She's great at covering trends. She covers government and law, but basically she's a person who can look into people's lives and say, there's a story that I really want to go with. I have a terrific staff, and I'm not so sure I bring that much to them as I manage their time as best I can and try to move Long Island businesses forward.
I'm sure that you have a lot to do with it, because I've watched it happen over the years. I watch how they respond to you. I watch how you guide them, and having been guided by you and continue to be guided by you, I understand where they're sitting and how it really inspires. You inspire, Joe. You could be as humble as you want, but you're inspirational. You're an unbelievable storyteller, and you prove that in Gods and Firemen unequivocally, and you prove it weekly with your column. I love reading Long Island business news because, one, it's very topical, right? You're right on top of the pulse on everything. It's just totally amazing to me, and it's done with class and grace, and you're very considerate. All of your writers, and this is something I want to praise Long Island Business News, you and editor Joe as well. You're always very kind and gentle and thoughtful. You don't go after it because you want to light something up. You don't go after it because, it's going to sell papers. You go after it because it's meaningful and your readers need to know about it or should know about it.
Well, I think that's part of the responsibility of responsible journalists, that you shouldn't go after anything to light anybody up or to hurt someone or to even to embarrass or shame. I think it's very important to get all sides and also understand that sometimes you have to reach out and do stories that are difficult, but they have to be fair.
Yes.
Difficult is part of life. Fair should be part of it too. When it's unfair, it's not a righteous way of living or writing. Right.
And there's a responsibility to that too, and you guys take it very seriously at Long Island Business News. So I'm really proud to be associated with all of you, and especially you, Joe, because you're just amazing at what you do, and I am so full of gratitude of what you've taught me and continue to teach me, how free flowing you are with your advice, recommendations, and just great direction. You just turn me in the right direction, and you're just wonderful about it. You're very gracious. With turning in the right direction, let's talk about Long Island Business News. Where's it going? Where are we going with it? Because I see a lot of great things and changes going on over there. Ever so subtle, but if you're watching, it's not so subtle.
Yes, I think Long Island Business News is continuing to evolve. And we do that because the news changes so much and the community changes so much. So I think the future of it is terrific because we are maintaining our circulation very, very well. We intend to expand it, but also we are expanding online. So our online product is getting bigger, and we're holding our own. What we want to be is the paper that movers and shakers are reading, that this is where all of those people go.
Right.
But we also want the people who want to be movers and shakers. So it's the next generation of the top executives, the leaders in the community, and also the next generation that's going to run the law firms, that are going to be the doctors that make innovative changes. We want all those people.
Yeah.
And we want to try to reach them as best we can. We also want them to come to us, not only with stories, but with column ideas, opinion pieces, parts of their world. And we will find a way to consider all of it.
Yeah, because it's really important. So I was told a long time ago, if you want to stay topical, you really need to read something, the newspapers, stay on top of the news to find out what's going on, because you're going to see trends. And after a while, when you do it long enough, you can pick up those trends as a reader of where your particular industry is going. Long Island Business News is a really good resource for that, for finding those trends, because you have people like David who are on top of what's going on in real estate, knows what's going on Long Island, and if you want to be part of that, you really need to read. You really need to read Long Island Business News.
I also like to liken it to a lot like the horse racing tabloids, because like if you want a tip sheet on Long Island business, you should go to Long Island Business News. If you want a horse, you go to the Daily Racing Form. I
didn't know where to go on a horse, but that's good to know.
That's what you would go to.
Okay.
So,
no, that's a great analogy, that it's the place to find
the tips.
The tips.
And trends, as well as and way people are thinking, It really I had to absorb a lot when I first came here 4 years ago, because I didn't come from a business background. I come from this is going to shock you, but a police and fire department kind of.
Really? That's so weird.
That's all I was covering for years and years. And,
really?
I know it's a shock.
Gods and firemen, and you came from a fireman background. Huh. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to connect those dots. I love the piece that you did on Captain Levy. He was a veteran who came back here, lost some limbs defending our country and protecting us, and the coverage you did on that was beautiful, just beautiful.
Well, that actually was an inspirational story, because this guy, when I met him, you would expect that someone who had suffered so much would not be comfortable with the talking about it the way he did. And what was remarkable is I left that interview, and I know you were involved in that interview at the time, helping set it up.
Yeah.
That I left the room thinking, why is that man in a better mood than I am?
he struck me with that. Remember we spoke about that. He's the one who taught me you can't be angry and have gratitude at the same time. It's not possible. You could try it. You can't do it. He was so grateful, and he would go back again to serve the country and do what he does. Felt badly that he couldn't go back and help his brethren overseas to protect us, and yet was so positive, right? Mm-hmm. And inspirational.
And he was in a better mood than I was.
Yeah.
And he felt like his life was going better, and he had lost limbs.
Yes.
But he hadn't lost his spirit.
Yes.
That's what we try to capture in a story, right?
Yes.
And it also turns out that many people in the community didn't see it that way. They saw it as, here's our chance to give this guy something and build something that will allow him to live a virtually as normal life as possible.
Yeah.
And they did that, willingly. And there were a cross-section of the community that did that.
Yeah.
It's a compelling story,
Yeah, it's beautiful. And time over time, when you read your paper, you're telling those type of compelling stories, those things that we shouldn't be taking for granted. The good news, as I would refer to it, because that was good news. It was bad news of what happened to him, but good news of what he did with it. And it's very inspirational that you can take that spirit and keep that spirit with the right attitude, with gratitude, positive thinking, and I see that you kind of gravitate to those kind of things, and you really get those stories out.
I feel as if the business community has always been underserved with those human interest stories. I've worked in newspapers, my whole adult life, and I don't remember seeing those stories come out of business. And yet, there's the business community standing up to help. And many times it's business leaders doing something that's good for the community that's beyond the simple bottom line. Isn't just dollars and cents. As important as those things are,
yes,
that's not the only thing.
Well, and doesn't that lead to all the different awards that Long Island Business News has? You have different topics. So those awards, like 50 top most inspirational women, and you have your top lawyers, you have your top business people, you have your humanitarians. You have these awards to recognize these unsung heroes, because again, they're doing these things. Most people don't know about it. They don't make a big ticker tape parade about it, but they really do need and deserve recognition for doing the right thing, for stepping beyond where they did not have to go. And I love that you guys really recognize that. It really brings forth really important people. We have a lot of amazing people on Long Island doing amazing things that, but for your paper, none of us would know about.
There's an old expression in the newspaper business. Most people only get in the paper 3 times in their life.
Okay.
When they're born, when they get married, and when they die.
Okay.
It's the only times their names ever appear. My policy has been, let's try to get everybody's name in the paper one more time.
Nice.
And there are so many people with stories out there. When you think about our events, Long Island Business News runs awards events to honor people in the community that have done either special service or have achieved excellence in their given field.
Extraordinary, yeah.
And these events are sometimes the only time people ever get truly recognized by their peers and colleagues, and also by a public entity. And these events are also kind of classy. It's a way to get out at night and be recognized. So we do them about close to once a month, I think.
They're amazing. I mean, I've had the great fortune of being honored, and thank you for that. But my even greater fortune is helping MC them and watching the energy in the room and the people coming to support the people who are being honored, and then the honorees, how humble and grateful they are, and unexpected. And it's a wonderful thing you guys are doing. Long Island Business News, I call you guys the 2 Joes, are the you guys that I refer to. Joe, the publisher, is magnanimous. He's always out trying to find these things, like yourself and your staff, find these people who are doing magnificent things over and over.
Joe Giametta, publisher,
Yeah.
has really taken the paper in a direction toward his humanitarian vision of Long Island, and has insisted that we go in that way. That's why I think our events with our events manager, Jenna Macri, has been amazing. Have really gone to a new level in this new administration here.
Yeah.
And Joe's just a genuine great guy, and everybody will tell you that.
Oh, yeah. No, Joe is.
And out in the community, he's just beloved.
Yeah.
You know, so.
As are you, Joe. As are you.
Thank you, Lori.
I really appreciate you being on the show. I hope you come back. I really want to speak more and go dive deeper into your book. Hopefully you'll be thinking about your next book, because I really want to know what's going to happen. And you won't tell me, so I'm going to have to wait and read it. But I really appreciate you coming on. If there's one thing to tell the listeners, what would that be? What inspiration could you throw there? I
think you can find inspiration anywhere, but it's really important to honor your father and mother. Like if you have a chance to call them today and they're still with us, give them a call. Out of the blue, it'll make their day.
It'll make yours too.
Probably will.
Yeah. Without a doubt. That's really, really good advice. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today on Healthy Lifestyle. My heart is always lifted by sharing this time with you. I want to thank Joe Dowd for being on. Thank you so much for your time, Joe. It's always inspirational being in the same room with you. Of course, our producer, Brian. Join us next Saturday right here on Long Island News Radio 103.9 at 3 p.m. In the meantime, please follow us on social media at Healthy Lifestyle with LA. So how will you help someone this week? Think about a person in life who's struggling in some way. Once you're clear on what action you can take, even ever so little, that may help make their life a little easier, make plans to follow through on it. And sometime this week, just do a little something for someone else. We're here to serve one another. And remember that by helping to make that person's life better in some small way, you will bring more joy and positivity in your own life as well. Remember, do a little something for yourself. It starts there. Create a new habit. It doesn't have to be big. Just do a little something. Create a new habit. Start that yoga. Start that exercise plan. Create that new balance. Thank you so much for joining us on Healthy Lifestyle. Until next time, I'm Lori Casdia. Show up for you and show up big.